This is our 8th interview, and today our guest is Giovan Bazan. Did I say it right?
Nailed it.
I did? Awesome. Giovan is an international motivational speaker and a mental health consultant. He helps people enhance their mental well-being so they can create the life experience they truly desire. His positive energy and his joyous personality has inspired people in 8 countries and counting around the world. His ability to translate his lived experiences into a powerful message resonates profoundly. He is a member of the International Initiative for Mental Health Leadership and serves on the board of directors for the Global Mental Health Community Foundation Open Excellence. He's self described as small in size, but big in wisdom. Thank you so much for joining me today, Giovan. I'm so excited about this conversation. Last night, I binge watched all of your YouTube videos that I could get my hands on, and you just you have a gift of talking about really hard things, inspiring people, not there's this thing about like inspiration porn where you're like, oh, you're so inspirational. It wasn't like that at all. It was like, oh my God, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I just appreciate you. So I want to share you with our audience because I just think you're awesome. So first, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself so they can kind of get to know you, where you're coming from. Tell me, the floor is all yours.
Sure. I'm 30 years old. I like long walks on the beach. Um, I grew up in California and moved to Georgia, South Carolina, Michigan, the Netherlands. Been around and seen a few things, been through a few things, and it's those experiences that have taught me a lot about my own journey and helped me to navigate a lot of the challenges that I've been through to get to where I'm at today. So I'm very grateful for those experiences, the good and the bad, and yeah, I'm just really glad to be here. My journey took me through the California foster care. Started in the California foster care system, and then we moved to Georgia, and then I went through the system there. So what I saw throughout my experiences was that there were a lot of good intentioned people in my life, who wanted to make a difference, and they were in it for all the right reasons. The challenge was, now and especially back then, is they were growing up in an environment where if something bad happened to them, then they were told to just suck it up, to just deal with it, and so they did just that. And what I learned is that when we don't address those challenges that we've experienced, whether it was something hurtful to us or whether we've made mistakes, when we don't address those things, they oftentimes come up and they affect our relationships with ourselves, the way we perceive ourselves, the way we care for ourselves, how we put ourselves as a priority. Um, and it affects the people around us in the workplace and relationships and the family. And so, there's an old idiom, old phrase that says, you repeat what you don't repair. And so it was really important to me to address a lot of the challenges that I faced growing up, so that one day when I do have little chillins running around, I'm giving them the life that they deserve. And so it's important that I address the things that happened in my past, and really come to terms with it. And that's uncomfortable and it's painful. But that's my experience. So sometimes people have different experiences where it may not be as uncomfortable, it may not be as painful. But the important thing that I've learned is to address those and to face them head on, instead of just pushing them down. And so that's what's been important in my life, and what inspires me to do what I do. Um, Something that's really important to me is something that I learned is that environment is very critical. So a lot of the challenges that I experienced at an early age had a lot to do with my environment, and I couldn't control them. And so it set this precedence or narrative that I followed throughout my life, that I was sort of just, life is happening to me.
Mm.
And so I was a victim to the circumstances and to everything that was happening in life. And then when I changed my mindset to life is happening for me, then it became, well, okay, yeah, when I was a child, I was victimized over and over again. But now, as an adult, I have the power to create the circumstances and conditions where I'm no longer a victim, or I no longer allow those conditions to exist where I could be victimized. Um, and so one of those things is my environment. So I mean, just recently I've moved here to Texas, and I'm around a supportive environment, what I call fertile soil. So there's an expression that I love saying, that if you plant a seed and that seed doesn't grow, you don't blame the seed. You change the environment that that seed was planted. And so, in that fertile soil, uh, that's when people can bloom and really flourish and become the best version of themselves. So, I always look for fertile soil and encourage people to do the same. And so that's where I'm at. And yeah, here in
Yeah.
Texas, enjoying the warm weather.
What part of Texas are you in? I'm so jealous.
Central Texas, Central Texas. So I've got like Austin, 45 minutes south, and then Fort Worth and Dallas, about 2 hours
Oh,
north.
yeah, I know where you are. I know that highway right down the middle. Yep.
Oh yeah,
I'm
the
so jealous.
notorious
It's so
highway.
nice and warm. I'm freezing over here. But okay, so you kind of touched on it, but let's just go a little deeper. So for people that don't know Giovan, he was in the foster care system at 11 months old. And you kind of talked about trauma. Like the circumstances that you were put in created your own trauma. But
Mhm.
also, you might not have said this directly, but like the trauma of the people taking care of you was then taken out on you. So there was that intergenerational trauma. Can you talk a little bit about that? That like, the adults that are meant to take care of us because they haven't like, worked on their own stuff. It's like we become victims of that and then we create our own. I don't know. Can you talk about like the role of trauma in your life?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because they say, your earliest childhood experiences really shape your worldview and how you interact throughout the rest of your life. And so, for me, those earliest stages of development were deeply impacted by losing my loving foster mother, losing, obviously not even being disconnected from my biological family, losing my loving foster mom to cancer at 6, and then experience through the 17 different placements that I grew up in foster care, experiencing physical and sexual abuse in those different placements. Um, and so that really shaped my worldview, and it shaped my perception of myself. And it's again, it's not that those people, it's not that all the people that were in my life in my childhood were intentionally trying to harm me or had malicious intentions. It's just they hadn't addressed the things that caused them pain and suffering. And so, what turned out to be what initiated as grief and sorrow turned out to be abuse and neglect. Um, and so, I really had to separate what happened to me from like my own personal identity as an adult. So like, for example, I can be extremely critical on myself, like very, very hard on myself. And so just for example, my mentor, Dr. Mike Weaver, he was awarded the AARP Purpose Prize and the Intergenerational Award for Excellence, for a lot of the work he does around mentoring. And I'm honored to say that I was one of his mentees when I was 14 years old. And he one time we've been to all over the country. We've met all over the country at different times when he was teaching at Temple and I was doing different speaking tours. And so several years ago we were in Philadelphia together and visited. I was doing a guest lecture at Temple, and we were leaving, and so we're walking down the street, and the most, I mean, just breathtaking person I've ever seen was walking up to me, and she was actually smiling at me and like making direct eye contact and like
Woo!
was totally just encouraged. Like, I mean, it couldn't have been more obvious that
Like a
that
movie. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, and instantly, and I remember I was walking next to Dr. Mike, and I just heard this voice, like, oh, there's no way, brother, like you're too short, like you're not smart enough, like you have nothing to offer, like and so and it just like I was like, yeah, you're right, and so as she was walking past her, like I looked into her eyes and she was like slowed down, like as if she was just expecting me to stop and talk to her, but my heart was racing and all those voices
Yeah.
and I agreed with it, and so I just kept going, and then once we had walked past, I realized that it wasn't Dr. Mike who had said that; it was my own internal dialogue.
Wow.
And so when we first hear that, when someone first hears that it was Dr. Mike, they might think, "Oh my gosh, how could someone possibly say that to you?" But when you hear that it was actually your own internal dialogue, we're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense and stuff." And so having the understanding that like I get to hold space for myself, I get to be kind to myself and not so mean. What I was hearing wasn't even me. it was the voice of the criticism that I heard when I was a kid,
Wow.
just playing over and over and over, and so until I internalized that and identified with that. And that's just one example. And so what I've had to do as an adult, again, dealing with the trauma of my childhood, is to really separate uh, what happened then from, and even then, like, that wasn't indicative to my identity. So like, there was periods of time where my foster parents would be like, you're a manipulator, you're a deceiver, you're ungrateful, you don't deserve like anything, like you just disgust us. And it was just like, it made me feel like I didn't want to be alive every single day, that I had no place, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't wanted, that I brought no value to this world. And it took me a long time, and it's still, even into my adult life, I'm 30 years old, and I still, have to work on that every single day, to remind myself that I have purpose, that I do belong here, that I'm okay, that it's all right, I have something to bring to this world. And so that's a huge impact, is the childhood. Absolutely.
So how did, because we this comes up sometimes in some of our screenings, that kids are medicated when they don't behave correctly, and I did it like an internship as a therapist, and I had clients that were children, teens really. And the one thing my boss said is if a teen or a child comes to our office, the teen or child doesn't need the therapy. It's the parents that need the therapy. The kid is
Mm,
reacting to what's going on in the context.
sure.
So can you talk about like how did you as a kid like behave or act out, or what was your reaction to the trauma that you were experiencing in all of its forms? Because I mean, just the attachment, like just hearing that you were put in the foster care system at 11 months old and then you lose another caregiver at 6, like those are two huge attachment, like serious trauma. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it breaks my heart like hearing it. But how did you as a kid like react to those things that were happening, and the physical and the mental abuse and all of that?
Yeah, so no, so we didn't, neither my foster parents at the time, the people who were taking care of me at the time, or myself were able, or even the doctors and the people involved in my treatment, could really put a finger on the pulse of what was transpiring. So at the time, medications were being seen as the first resolution and the only resolution, and it was very cookie cutter approach. So if they check these boxes as it relates to symptoms of behavior, then they need these medications, and these medications would be helpful. And because the doctors were told that, then by the powers that be, and then they told the teachers that, and then the teachers passed it on to my parents and my foster folks, and then my foster folks, they believed it, and then I believed it ultimately and internalized it, that I required these medications and stuff. But what was really happening was I was responding to what had happened to me. And so when I would, I just remember, just having these like 0 to 100 mood swings, where I would be having a good time, and playing with my peers, and then something could trigger me. And it would, whether it was like I don't know, like sometimes my at school, I remember my friends, like their parents would come and sit with them at lunch and stuff like that, or like they would come for show and tell, or they would just different stuff, and I would just be overwhelmed instantaneously with like sadness and despair, and I couldn't put a finger on it. And then there were other times when, like, I would have outbursts of anger, and just, and I had a lot of reason to be angry. I had a lot of reasons to feel things very passionately,
Yeah.
and so the way they responded to it was by medicating me and causing me to suppress those emotions. And those emotions, they're like, nah, bro, we want to get out. And so they, so my behavior was indicative of that. And we didn't know enough about trauma at the time to see what was really transpiring. So they put me on medications at 6 years old, saying that, again, their intentions were good, but they were utilizing the medications for behavior modification and not for therapeutic healing.
Right.
And so what should have been a short term, something that was short term, combined with other treatment, like therapy, or just, I mean, there's countless other things that you can do, like diet and physical fitness, and just, I mean, just a
Somebody
plethora.
asking you like what is going on at home, like what would that have done? Just someone asking you like what is going on, is there a
Well,
reason why you're feeling like this, like did anybody even ask you?
yeah, I so So one of the things that added a lot of stress to the household, which was then taken out on me, was the fact that there were so many social workers and therapists and court people that constantly were in and out of the house. And like I feel like my foster folks at the time were really, upset about that, because here they're being scrutinized and they're doing the best they knew how to do. And here they were, all the best intentions, bringing someone into their home, and then now there's only one parental figure, and that person is stuck dealing with everything plus all the trauma. And so, you know, um, so there were a lot of people in my life. At 6 years old, I didn't have the intellectual capacity to articulate, this is exactly what's transpiring. And so, from her jaded perspective, based off what she didn't know in her own experiences, my lack of awareness, and combined with everything else, everyone just thought, oh, he's being recalcitrant, or oh, he's just a rebellious, child who's attention seeking and whatnot. Um, and there may have been like small fractions, I mean, that's childhood, right? That's what kids do that from time to time. Kids behave, act out and seek attention and do things like that. But when it's been compounded by trauma, then those behaviors are exasperated, or those symptoms of behavior are exasperated. So there were people in my life. It's just we didn't know how to articulate it at the time.
Yeah. And so what happened was that led to what we call now we talked about this when we first arranged this interview, but that the kids nowadays lead either to the school to prison pipeline or to medication, like in the mental health system, when you're bad in school. And for
Right.
people not familiar with school to prison pipeline, it means that you might skip school, you might have too many tardies, they put you in detention, then detention leads to you maybe get in a fight in the hallway or something, or your homework falls behind, and the next thing you know, you have juvenile justice involvement. Now you're missing school, now you're falling behind in school. Where do you think a kid like that is going to end up? Not with a good job. You know what I mean? So it's like all these things are stacked against kids that are experiencing trauma in the home. And then the other side of it is, oh, you're acting bad, well, we're going to medicate you. And especially with Black male youth, that is like through the roof. These kids get so medicated. So can you talk about what happened that led to the juvenile justice system, and then what was that like?
Yeah. So after my foster mother passed away of cancer, we all handled it differently in the home, and for me, that's when my behavior became more erratic. It was another level of trauma that I was experiencing. And so they tried a lot of medications, and then they would change the doses, and they would change the prescription itself. There were times where I was taking like 6 different medications at one time, for one to help me sleep, one to give me energy, one to keep me calm, one. And so I mean, like, there was just turmoil inside. um and so we have fight or flight, freeze, fight or flight, experiences, reactions, as as just being humans. And so uh, when I was faced with trauma, like physical abuse, in some of the placements that I lived in, then my instinct was to run away, to run away from that. And it was also, and so you think about, like, when I experienced something painful and those that were caring for me experienced something painful, they pushed it away, or ultimately they ran away from that pain, right? So it was like, again, a narrative, a pattern of behavior that was ingrained in me. And so here I am being faced with more trauma, and I began running away. In the state of Georgia at that time, when a child runs away from their home or from their placement, their residence, they're considered an unruly child. And so, I was
Wait,
running
wait,
away.
wait, wait. So I gotta stop you there. So it just feels like we're blaming the kid. Like there was probably a reason you were running away,
Absolutely, of course,
right? But
right,
no, it's your fault, and we're gonna medicate you more, or we're gonna put you away because you're running away from maybe some more trauma, which
right,
is actually your body's way of trying to keep you alive and save your life. Wow.
sure,
Wow.
sure. And so obviously, like, my folks at the time, they didn't appreciate, they didn't appreciate any of it, right? So I was running away, but to them it was just, oh, he's acting out again, and now we've got to go wake up everyone in the neighborhood to try and go find him. um and the actual like the first time I ran away was a whole story that I'm not going to get into, but it's I put it in my book, so that's one of the chapters and stuff. But but I dive into the actual like psychology behind it. But anyway, um, so I uh, so I was running away. I was trying to escape the trauma. I was acting out in the home because of the medications, because of the trauma. And so my foster mother at the time, I believe that she was out of options. She was out of resources to help with what I was experiencing. And again, no fault of her own. And so she saw the juvenile justice system as a way to help control me, as a way to help, and so one of the siblings in the home would act out against me, and then he was the child that they always wanted from birth and stuff like that. And so it was like they were like their own family unit, and then I was someone who was stuck with them,
Yeah.
who that
They
they
were
were stuck
Yeah,
taking care
he was
of.
their favorite and you were like the second wheel, third wheel.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, because she ultimately had no intention of keeping me in the first place. It's her partner who wanted to keep me, and but when she passed away, one of her last wishes were keep him in the home so he doesn't bounce around from place to place. And so there was a lot of resentment and a lot of like just grief around that, and here she is now. She's stuck with a kid that she didn't even intend to, who has all this trauma and is acting out, and she was doing her best. And so anyway, this other sibling, he would go out of his way to basically demonize me in front of her and in front of the other people in the home. And so she felt that the best course of action was to get me involved in the juvenile justice system, was to have the juvenile justice system basically supervise me. And so I was like 12 years old when they put me on juvenile parole probation. And from there, once I was in the system, it took me the original probation sentence was like 2 years, and it took me 8 years to get out of the system. Um, and not for lack of trying, and not for lack of anything on my end, So when I ran away again because of the trauma, that was a violation of juvenile probation, and so then I had to serve a sentence. When they put me in the juvenile detention center, first of all, incarcerating kids is like exasperates any level of trauma, and is probably the most detrimental thing that you could do to a juvenile, with the exception of people who have like committed like really heinous crimes such as like murder or rape or something of that nature, in which case they need rehabilitation services.
But not
Not
for running away.
Right, not for running away. And so I remember, the FBI brought in this one kid at 2 a.m. in my cell because the juvenile detention center was at max capacity. And I was the only cell that only had one body in it. And so they brought at like 2 or 3 a.m, they brought a kid in, and they were like, well, we're going to put him in your cell because we know that you're not going to cause any issues with him, because I was always on my, best behavior. Like I wasn't,
Out. Yeah.
and so I was like, well, what's he in here for? And they're like, well, he just murdered 3 people in this community, and if we're afraid that someone's going to retaliate against him because he killed 3 people in this community. So I mean, that was just one. And again, not to identify him by what he went through, because he never caused me harm. He was always nice to me. He was, you know what I mean? Like we always like, I saw him beyond his circumstances. And when he explained the situation, it was a lot deeper than what, any label could explain. And so, but in any case, so the juvenile justice system, it just exasperated the system. So I was around all these behaviors that I certainly hadn't exhibited. And then, you know, in the juvenile detention center, when people fight, that's a symptom of trauma, right? Like you're experiencing these raw emotions. You have uncertainty. You don't know what your future is going to be. You're locked away in a cement room. Like you have your freedom stripped away, your identity stripped away. I mean, it's just this constant anxiety, constant trauma, constant terror. And so yeah, and it was really detrimental to me. I mean, it was very inducing of PTSD.
Yeah.
And
Well, even just, I mean, like right now it's cold out and we're all stuck inside. I feel like a cabin fever of just being inside. So I can't imagine a bunch of teenager or middle school kids trapped inside. You can't go outside. You're not in your clothes. You don't have, your family, your support system, your school to go to. That's only going to breed like frustration, aggressiveness. It's not like you're in there like doing support groups, you know what I mean?
Right,
It's not
right.
a therapeutic environment.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in this one facility I was in Decatur, Georgia, the program director, he would bring in like speakers and stuff, and I really commend him because he recognized that we are more than our behavior. We recognize that we are more than the labels that were put on us by the system. And so he would bring in as many people as he could to mentor us, to do creative activities with us. And I can't articulate how helpful that was, like during that period of time. Um, and so that was really helpful. But yeah, juvenile justice had a huge negative impact, and it took me, and then the other thing was when you're on, it was very rare to be in the juvenile justice system and not be on medications and not be on a cocktail of medications. Um, and so like even the JCO, the correctional officers, they would say, in their case meetings about each child, they would say, hey, his behavior has been erratic, da 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 da, we need to up his medication. And so then you saw, more than half of the kids who were in the juvenile detention center, myself included, were like zombies, like because I mean they had sedated us to the point to where we couldn't do anything but just sit there and drool out of our mouths. And then so of course once the medication starts wearing off and those emotions that have been suppressed all day start coming up, yeah, our behavior is going to be erratic and fluctuate.
Yeah.
uh, uh, so in any case, so they would, and if you didn't take your medication, then that was a violation of your probation. You would get more time. And so there were a lot of challenges with that. I was fortunate that at the last time I was incarcerated, actually, as a juvenile, I was sentenced to, I had multiple violation of probations. And so my file made it look like I was a really recalcitrant child. But in fact, they kept sending me back to the same traumatic environment where the behaviors and the trauma would repeat themselves. And so it was a revolving door. The recidivism is is a horrible monster to escape. And so uh, I actually, every time I sat down in a meeting with anyone in the courtroom, social worker, in the juvenile detention center, everyone, the number one question they asked was, how are his meds working? And and if I was doing good, they would say, oh, his medication is working. And I didn't want to live the rest of my life with my behavior, my successes, my failures to be indicative of a pill. I wanted to be able to, because I knew I was greater than that. I knew I could do more than that. And so I mean I pretty much went in there and told him, I was like, y'all are gonna take me off these medications or I'm gonna take myself off these medications. And so I worked with the team and they gradually weaned me off those medications while I was in the juvenile justice system. And so when I came out, I was no longer on the medications. And so I was able to really learn for the first time how to address just regular feelings. I mean, just things like having normal interaction or having friends or what's appropriate behavior, what's appropriate responses and stuff. And everyone's unique, so it's different for each people. But being able to stabilize myself and assess myself to find what's best for me in new environments and stuff. And so I had to I had to learn all of that for the first time, but I was able to do it on my own. And now at 30 years old, I haven't taken medications in it's been what, like 12 years.
So you were
And
medicated from 6 to 18.
to 18 when I
Do you
told them I wanted off all the medications.
do you think that when you're growing up, you kind of, like you just said, you learn how to socialize, you learn how to, like, maybe you get angry, you talk about how angry you are. Do you think the medication like impeded your development?
Absolutely, 100%, in so many ways. I mean, and this is all scientifically based. Like I don't have like a doctorate or anything, so I can't cite the
No,
specific
you are the
examples.
expert of your life. We don't need no degree here.
Amen. Amen. But what I can tell you from my experience is that uh kind of lost my train of thought there.
About how did it impact your development as a kid?
Oh, a prime example. So even like even in communicate, even in conversation and stuff, and just sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to connect things, and but in any case, so like there was a whole lot of physical impact that it had on me, just like in the development of like like a developing child into their adolescence and stuff. It's there was a lot of stuff that it suppressed and stuff, hormones and whatnot. And so like when I came off, I had these, like, I hadn't felt the adolescent pubescent
Wow.
raging hormones until I came off at 18, and then all of a sudden it was just like I didn't know what to do with myself or do with that. And so there was, I mean, I just want to be honest, since we're, there's people,
Please
I know
do.
there's people out there who have similar experiences. I mean, like when I first came off the medications and the first day I got out of juvie, leggings weren't a thing when I went in, and when I came out, everyone's wearing leggings, and like and I'm feeling these like urges, like every woman is attractive to me now. And so um so I was staring, and like I remember my mentor, he was like, you can't, that's not appropriate, that's like not okay to stare, like, and like that's, and so that's something that I had to
Just
learn, at
know.
18 years
Yeah,
old, when
yeah.
that might be where someone else might have learned that at like, that might just have been a normal processing thing. But again, I spent 18 years in a system where I was only with males. The
Yeah.
correction officers were males. The boys in the dorm were males. Every foster home and facility that I was in, they separated us by gender. So all of a sudden, I had, those were just things that most people understand naturally that I had to learn and stuff.
Wow.
And there was, it was embarrassing, obviously, and like I look back at it now and hearing it out loud, it's like, ooh. But that was something that was my journey that I had to experience for myself and learn for myself, and I'm glad I did, obviously.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a really clear, I mean, example of like how the medication can like affect you when you're trying to develop, and just the trauma, all of it. Oh, so no, I thank you for being so vulnerable. It's really clear. It's really
Yeah.
clear.
So, and then in other ways as well. I mean, just like with the understanding my behaviors and how to respond to my behaviors as they come up. So, like, if something happens that is disappointing, having had so much disappointment in my life in the past, something disappointing happens, and then it brings up every single thing that I've been through all at once. So, whereas some people might be like, why is this affecting you so harshly? It's like, like you
I,
don't have,
I call
you
that
couldn't possibly understand.
I call that like Christmas lights. Like a person will turn on one of your lights, but for me it's like plugging it into the socket and the whole
Mm,
string lights up.
there it
That's
is.
how I describe it. It's the whole string. You just
It
hit
is.
all of it. I can totally relate to that.
No,
Ugh. Anyway, geez. Well, thank you so much for being open. Okay, now I want to tell you that I am mindful that we just talked about a lot of really heavy stuff.
sure.
And I just wanted to like I just want to take a deep breath because it's intense. It's intense
Yeah.
what you've been through, like for real. It's really been intense. So I kind of want to shift a little bit. We're running out of time because we're having such a good time talking. But I want to talk about kind of how you rebuild your identity, and the way that you phrased it in one of your podcast interviews that I heard you say. You said you turned your mess into a message. So maybe talk about what happened after you came off the meds, and how has those experiences informed who you are today, and like what have you done with that? What's happened?
Yeah, for sure. From, I think there's this common misconception that after trauma, life goes back to normal. And it never goes back to any way. And so like that translates to what we're experiencing now with COVID as a world. So people a lot of times reference going back to normal. And I think most of us have accepted the fact that there is no normal anymore, and that we don't ever really go back to anything. Time moves forward and we progress, and so so there's sometimes there's this misconception that like a kid gets out of foster care and man, you had a traumatic run of it, things were tough, but you're an adult now, and things are just gonna magically work themselves out and stuff, and that's just not the case, and it's so in my adult life, coming out of growing up in the foster care system and the juvenile justice system and the mental health system and everything that it was that alludes to, um, there were challenges that I'm still learning to deal with in my adult life. So for a while, not having any familial support was a huge one, and so and there was times where like I experienced being homeless. There were times where I spent a year and like some change living in my car, and these were all challenges that weren't because of, like, I didn't just go wake up one morning and be like, oh well, a decision I made led to this. It was like a whole it was a bunch of
Culmination. Yeah. Yeah.
thank you. It was a whole series of events that led to that impacted that, or created those that situation and stuff. I think what was important, what helped me was that I never allowed myself to I'll take that back. I There were times where I looked at my situation and everything that I had been through, and the voices in my childhood, that would come up, and it was overwhelming, honestly, and it made me feel like I don't want to do this anymore. Um, but I didn't stay there, so it's like it's this whole mantra of like standing on your story and not being stuck in your story, and so rewriting that narrative. So for me, uh, where I got turned my mess into a message was from motivational speaker Josh Shipp, who was also a foster kid. And so seeing that someone else could stand, on the other side of that experience, um, excuse me, after having put in that work. Uh, and so for me, so what I did is I after high school, I tried to get into the military, and that didn't work because of my foster care and juvenile justice experiences. But I 100% believe I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing now, and so there's no love lost there. Um, and so I kind of just I went through this period of time where I was like, I don't really get being an adult, and I think a lot of people experience that, but
I do. I still do. I'm 41. I'm like, I don't understand the guilt thing. I don't, because I do think trauma can impact like your responsibility level, your like I don't get things. Like I don't understand. I don't want an apartment with a bunch of stuff in it. I don't get that.
there it is.
You know what I mean? So I can relate to that. No judgment for me.
Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff that I had to sit down and be like, what who am I, first of all, separating everything that had happened to me, everything that I'd been through, everything anyone said about me, and just being like, what are my values, like what's important to me, and where do I what does the person that I want to be, what does their life look like? And
Mm.
so once I've identified that, then I'm already that person, but I just do those things that that person would do. And so I went out and I went back to therapy, and I talked about those very, very painful things in my past and really worked through them. And let's see, I buckled down on my finances and been like, well, no one ever, ever explained anything about and I'm not even talking about like budgeting. You go online and learn about that. There's a lot of stuff you can go online and learn about, but the longevity of finances and investing and like just learning about different opportunities and stuff like, and so what I'm really grateful for is that I went out and was proactive with it. I was proactive with my mental health. I was proactive with my physical health. I was proactive with my financial well-being, because there's a life that I want to live. There's a person that I want to be, and it's necessary for me to do these things. And in doing that, it gave me insight into how to do it and how to come from what I went through, and then feeling the not an obligation but a desire, a real passion to help, or to just articulate my experiences so that other people will know that they're not alone in what they're going through, and if they are going through something, that there's no shame in that. like it's the human experience. And right now, like, mental health being so taboo, I mean, on the news, they, if it bleeds, it leads. So if it right now, if it relates to mental health, it's about something traumatic happening or something horrendous happening. And so people correlate mental health with something horrible.
Right.
And so and it's not, because we all experience mental health. We all have mental health just like our physical health.
Yeah.
And so learning to be proactive with caring for my physical health helped me definitely build my company, and do what I'm doing today. So
Yeah. No, sometimes I'm bothered by they call everything mental health, and I'm like, no, that's your life. Like your
mm,
life. You have to take care of these things in your life. Not everything is mental health. It shouldn't be labeled like that. But wow. Okay, so we have a couple questions.
mhm.
This is a big one that I've been thinking a lot about lately. Do you think that trauma can be a label?
Ooh,
Just like bipolar or ADHD or, you know?
yeah. I mean, like it to me, trauma is like an experience. I think sometimes it can be used as a label, and people can accept that label as an identity.
Mhm.
And the challenge with that is like, that I had to work through with myself, is that like, for example, I was molested for many years, growing up, and in different placements. And so for a long time I was like, oh, I'm a victim, you know what I mean? And I accepted this narrative that like people are just gonna get over on me and just take advantage of me, and stuff like that. Um and so that I allowed that label to be my identity,
Mm,
instead of an experience. And I think separating those two, like, trauma can be an experience, and is different for all people and looks different for all people and
yeah.
affects people differently because we're all different. But it doesn't have to be an identity
Who
or
you are.
label.
Wow, that's really important distinction. Yeah. Because like listening to you talk about this, it sounds like I think I can relate to it too, that my life has been a series of traumas. Like it's like I
Mm,
can't get away from it. You know what I mean? Recently it's not been so bad, but life
sure.
is inherently traumatic for
Yeah.
some people. Like I think coronavirus in itself is traumatic. Like we have had to
Yeah.
change the way we live overnight. And are we ever going to be able to go in a store and see people without masks on and not think that's a weird thing? Sorry, the dog is really loud.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, so but in a way you're like, okay, this happened to me. I accept that it happened. And now what am I going to do?
Right.
You know,
Right.
like
Right.
I can't like live in that forever. And that was
Sure.
my experience. Like, okay, well, I'm going to make the best of what I have. It's not very much, but here we go. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to wing it and figure it out, you know? So it sounds like that's kind of what you came to too, that like, well, shit, this really bad stuff happened to me, but I don't know. What am I going to do now? You know?
Yeah. So like, people like yourself and me, who have had to experience like radical trauma, who have experienced radical trauma early on. It's like, sometimes some people are, COVID had a different impact on everyone. And I just, my heart goes out to everyone, who all the lives lost, and everyone who's been impacted, financially and physically and with their families. Um, but it just goes to show how critical mental health is, because like you could be physically fit and have challenges with your mental health. You could have all the money in the world and have challenges with your mental health. So I think people look at mental health as being a sideshow that some people experience, when it's really the main event for all people. Because at any time, as we've seen in recent history, at any time, everything, trauma can just pop up out of nowhere and impact everyone. And that's why mental health is so critical, because if we proactively care for our mental health, then when those traumas do occur, which we do know will occur because we're human and this is life, then we're better set to handle that trauma, to address those challenges, and to move forward, less encumbered and less impacted, adversely.
So when you say take care of your mental health, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
Well, for me, that means that, one, I address, everything that I've experienced in the past, and work through that. And again, it doesn't just happen overnight, and it's not just some easy fix. It's something that I really work with every single day. Um, it means that, I'm actively working on my physical fitness. And again, I don't want to portray, a lot of people think, oh, they'll look at somebody and be like, oh, well, they don't look like they're physically fit.
Right.
but that's completely irrelevant. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And like, regardless of where you're at in your life, like, just the simple act of working on it, if that's one push up a day or anything, you know what I mean? Or just like if you're someone who sits around all day, like standing up for like 2 minutes, like, you're progressively working on your physical fitness. So, and it's the act of progression that is good for the mental health. And so, so that's something I do. My diet is consistent with foods that are good for brain functioning and so forth of that nature. Um, and then making sure I'm doing things that bring me happiness, bring me joy. Again, this will look different for everyone. Some people this might be playing video games. Some people this might be, for me it's skydiving. For me it's
Oh,
doing
I love
jujitsu.
skydiving.
For
Have
me,
you done it?
oh yeah,
Oh my God, there's no greater feeling in the world.
it's one of the greatest therapies. I strongly
It is.
encourage anyone, especially
Do
if
it.
you're afraid of it,
Do it.
especially if you're
Yes, at
terrified of
least
it,
once.
do it.
Wow. I never thought this conversation would lead to skydiving, but
Oh, for sure,
definitely a
yeah.
spiritual experience. Wow. You'll never look at the sky or the world the same way, I can guarantee you. Wow. So it sounds like you've kind of been where I was. Like we went through the mental health system, we took all the meds, we did everything they told us to do, and then at a certain point we had to come to like what is right for me. See, this dog is obsessed with me. I told you.
Animals are great for your mental health too.
Yeah, right. They are, right. So yeah, I'm the same as you. That diet, who I let around me, who I talk to, the friends that I use for support,
Environment, yeah.
things I do. I'm doing this like 30-day mindfulness challenge where every day you have to do like a couple minutes of mindfulness. And last night I just laid on my yoga mat. I was like, you're not allowed to look at your phone. You're just gonna lay here with yourself for 5 minutes, and it's uncomfortable, but like, so I do things like that. So it sounds like you're kind of doing the same thing, and it's that same thing of like, it's not just your mental health, it's your life. Like, this is your life. What are you going to do with it, Wow. So okay, we have about 6 minutes left. I'm going to read you a couple of the questions from the audience. If you have any questions, now is the time before we hang up. So there's only a few. One person said, what is the name of your book and how can I find it?
So the name of the book, we've got two working titles, and we're hoping to launch it in Mental Health and Foster Care Awareness Month, which is May, also my birth month. Whoop, whoop. I don't think that's coincidence. There's one of two titles. One, G for short, which is my website, gforshort.com. And then the other working title is Fertile Soil. So if you're watching this, please don't go use those titles.
Oh no, it's copyright now because you said it out loud. So where can they find it when it comes out? On your website? Can you read
on
your
website, on all my social media, and we have a lot of partners in mental health and foster care and juvenile justice around the country and around in other countries as well, who have worked with us or partnering with us to promote it as well, put it out there.
Awesome. All right, and then next, what do you attribute your recovery to?
Whew. So that's so much. People around me. So consistently throughout my life, there were people who just made a fundamental impact on my life, and some of those people were in my life for a matter of a few minutes, but the impact they made was significant. Just really briefly, one time I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I was in the courthouse, and they were trying to decide what to do with me. And I was crying uncontrollably. The judge told me to go outside and compose myself. So I was standing outside the courtroom in a extremely busy courthouse, and my suitcase with all my belongings is in it, and I'm standing next to it, and I'm just sobbing hysterically, and nobody even saw me. Like everyone just kept walking around, and I was just hurting so much. And I remember it like it happened yesterday. This couple, it was a man. He had locks that came down to his waist, and he had a gold tooth. And the woman who was with him, maybe it had been his mother, a little older lady. They came up to me, and like they stopped and they looked right at me, like in the midst of everyone moving around them and everything going on. And I remember just looking up, and they were standing there looking at me, and like right in front of me. And they walked up to me, and they said, they put their arms out, and they said, "Can we give you a hug?" And I just went, I melted right into them, and strangers. And they said, "I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you've been through, but you matter, and we love you." and it was just like, I mean, oh man, like it just was
Wow.
so profound,
I got
and
the
I
chills.
felt they validated me. They, my existence, who I am, like, and so I remember that, and I remember at that time, I was going through a very dark challenge with my mental health, and not wanting to exist, and that really changed the narrative for me, just that few moments, and that has been and we all have that power, we all have that ability, whether it's we're interacting with someone that we don't even know for 30 seconds, or someone we have a close relationship with. So I attribute a lot of my recovery, excuse me, I don't want to say recovery like it's a finish, like it's a journey, but it's more of a process. But my recovery process, I would attribute to a credit, people in my life who made significant impacts, who I call my chosen family, um, and uh, and
The human connection, that validation, that
yeah,
unconditional love, really.
yeah, and the passion, and the desire to want to change the circumstances of what I went through so that others don't have to, which is why I share my story, not to garner sympathy or anything of that nature, but to let other people know who may be going through it, like the kid I was when I was 9, 10 years old, who thought it was just me, and like it was just everything was my fault. uh that you're not alone, and that you can come out on the other side, and
Yeah.
that's what I attribute.
What do you so this will be the last question from me, and we'll probably close right after it. But what do you think are some solutions? Oh my God, look at this dog. Sorry.
Hey, puppy.
He's a Great Dane and he's literally so sorry, he's literally standing on me. Okay, what do you think are some solutions to teen and child mental health? Like what are we doing wrong? What could we do better? From where you stand, what you've been through, what do you think about the current system?
Yeah, well, one, I mean, that's an incredible question, and I can speak from my experience, lens of perception for what I went through. But what was important to me is that the adults in my life when I was a kid were looking through their lens of perception, which was radically different. And so they were saying, "Oh, well, we can treat him and we can fix him based off our perception and such." And so I think if we really want to impact young people, then we need to meet them where they're at, and we need to look through a different lens, instead of a lens like, while we do, we have knowledge and expertise and etc. The world is radically different for young people now, than even when I was, that age and stuff. So we really need to do a lot of open-minded listening, to young people, and really just trying to understand them, and not bring our own preconceived notions and ideas and stuff. That would have been critical for me when I was young, holding space for me to just, like to have the exactly that question to me when I was young, as opposed to just like it just felt like everyone was telling me, and using their own ideas and assumptions about what was going on to treat me and address me.
Wow, that was good. That was a really good answer. So, so I guess we're gonna close out. Can you tell people where to find you, kind of what you do? Oh my gosh, this dog, he's obsessed with me. I'm so sorry. Just tell people like that you do motivational speaking and speaking all around the world for corporations, for schools. Kind of tell people what you do. Where can they find you? Will you spell out your website? Because I think some people are wondering, is it GEE or is it just G? Like, tell
Sure.
people where to find you and all that, what you do.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so you can find my website at G, the letter G, FOR, short, G for short.com. And the whole reason that came about was because my website is actually my name, giovanbazan.com. But, it was a bit adventurous for me to assume that people could know how to spell my name just by hearing it for the first time. So we changed my website to G for short.com, which is what all my friends and people close to me call me, is G for short. So yeah, and so I do a lot of consulting. There's a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses. I've worked with, in Australia and Sweden, and different parts of the United States and Canada as well. Um, to just bring that lived experience, which is so critical. And again, like I would love it if you worked with me, if we worked together, but it doesn't have to be with me. You have people in your own backyard with lived experiences. And if we really want to change the way that mental health is perceived, then we have to bring people to the table in leadership positions who have that lived experience. There's nothing about us without us is the whole mantra.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to close out. I know that our audience really enjoyed this talk. A lot of people are saying, wow, I can so relate to how you're feeling. I'm working through my own issues with worthiness and believing that I matter. So what you said today really resonated with a lot of people, and I just hope they all reach out to you. If I think you're a wonderful person. I think I just feel like a kindred spirit to you because we've been through so much, but we're still kicking. Like we're not giving up. We're not going to be who other people think that we are. We just keep going, and people, I don't know. I could say so much, but I'll
Last
stop.
shout out to everyone. Go see Medicating Normal.
Oh,
Go put it out on every network avenue that you can to share it. And I mean, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Long overdue.
Thank you. All right. So thank you so much for joining us for our live discussion. If you haven't seen Medicating Normal yet, you please check out our website. It's medicatingnormal.com/watch, and you'll see all the listing of upcoming screenings. They're all over the world. You can view them from the UK. I know somebody asked about that. And also we have more discussions like this one every 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, you'll join Nicole for a discussion with Dr. Clive Sherlock from the UK. And we add more screenings often, and we have YouTube videos and panels, and this discussion will be available on YouTube later. So please check that out. Let's see what else. I think I just winged it, so I don't have to follow my script anymore. But anyway, if you'd like to support the outreach efforts to bring the film and conversations like this one to more communities worldwide, please consider making a donation at medicatingnormal.com/donate. Thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you, Giovan, G for short. Thank you for spending an hour with us. I really admire you. All right. And I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.